Welcome to my YouTube channel, Dennis the Monk. I'm Dennis Vysokovsky, the host of the show, and today's topic is finding self. In everything that I do, particularly on this channel, I draw from the wealth of my past history as being a Carmelite monk for 34 years. I found that spirituality is universal. Although I use the universal principles that I find within the New Testament, the reason why they're called universals because it crosses the barriers of culture and belief. You don't necessarily need to be a Christian to apply these universal principles. They work regardless of, our faith and regardless of where we worship. Though at the end of the day, the most important element is love. Loving self, others, and that higher power, which I choose to call God. When we allow ourselves to participate that, it works for us when we can't work for ourselves, when we can't discover and understand what's happening around us. So today, in talking about finding self, it brings me to my own personal history as a Carmelite friar, and there's a story. It's called The Way of the Pilgrim. It comes from 19th century Russian literature. It's a narrative of an individual narrative of a person, a pilgrim who is crossing Russia. And in that experience of crossing Russia, he's saying or repeating or trying to bring within himself the Jesus prayer. And the Jesus prayer is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Now, in that process of repeating over and over and over again that phrase, oftentimes you'll find it called, it's a prayer beads that they wear around the wrist with a little dangling piece of thread or pieces of thread. And it's just a way of not counting, but just being aware in the moment of being united with God, in this case, Jesus, the Christian God, and asking for mercy. Now, these are old words that have perhaps different meanings now because God is all merciful. God is all loving. God is all compassion. Our God is not a judgmental God because he doesn't need to. He sees all and understands all and knows all. Those prayers, like the Jesus prayer, is meant for us to help us become more centered, to become in the present moment and be centered on God in a particular way. In this way, using the Jesus prayer, as you repeat over time this prayer, seemingly simple, it shortens from that saying I shared a moment ago, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner, to have mercy on me. I believe what really happens is it's already happened. Have mercy on me, God. All those things that we hope for are already occurring. But sometimes we as individuals need to give ourselves mercy. When we allow our heart and our spirit and our mind to come together, there is a centeredness where we understand universal principle, objective truth, and objective love, which is the way of the heart. It brings all of us together so that we can, as an individual of soul, mind, and body, intellect, be united. This is what often happens with people who lose themselves. As I shared in the description to this YouTube presentation, oftentimes suffering of the heart, the mind, the body, the spirit, that suffering, and if it's long suffering, we begin to lose our identity because this suffering causes us to be dependent on other things outside of ourselves. If we're in pain, we may need others to help us. If we're suffering internally and we're not sharing with anyone, the burden begins to become confusing for us. It begins to maybe redirect our thoughts into more unhealthy ways because the thoughts are locked inside of ourselves, and we need to get that outside of ourselves so it loses power over us. Nonetheless, as a human being, we're made up of the physical body, the spiritual elements, and the intellectual. We can even go deeper and say the soul, but we'll just stick with those three for now. There are some people, particularly autists, people who are autistic, are oftentimes lost in the intellect, or they can be lost in their spirit. They're incredibly spiritual people. But seldom are they in the physical world. Well, as human beings, other people who are not autists are usually either in the physical world, meaning the here and now and what's happening around me, social experiences, or we're in the intellectual world, in our minds. In any case, no matter who we are, when we don't allow ourselves to combine the soul, mind, and the body, there's a separation. And I'll explain this. In that separation, for example, physically, if I am separated from my physical body, anything could happen. I could become ill. There's all kinds of physical ailments that can occur to me, and I just I allow myself not to address what's going on inside of my body for whatever reason, fear, and it starts to overtake me and the individual. And in that case, we are denying the physical to the point that now we have no choice but to accept it because it's now captured us. We don't have control. Like, for example, if you have a stomach ache and you don't see a doctor and it goes on for years and it could be cancer, and then you get sick and you're consumed with the illness. That's one. So in the intellectual or the emotional part of our being, the mental part of our existence, oftentimes we can get caught up in our thoughts. Our thoughts have direct access and control how we feel most of the time. If our thoughts affect how we feel, what's going up in here, if we're not aware of our thoughts, if we allow our thoughts to rule us, for example, if I'm emotional, I may believe the emotional experience and not the reality of the experience. My feelings are real. However, my feelings may be distorted relative to the truth of the reality of what's around me. Again, the need for us to have other people with whom we can reach out to and share our experience to get it outside of ourselves so it loses control over us. When we allow, either in our mind now or physical body, when we address what's there by sharing it with someone else, physically, we share it with a doctor, someone who can tend to our needs. When it's emotional, intellectual, we share outside to another human being, sharing our thoughts and feelings. It loses a sense of control over us, and now we can see more clearly. Because when we speak out to someone, there's a mirror there and that person can tell us what they're understanding us to see. When we hear it back to us, it clicks. One, it loses the thoughts that were held in our head, lose power over us, while also having a loving person with whom we can share our experience. They can also give us insight just by conversation. Now there's the spiritual side to our being. Many people tend to avoid the spiritual and maybe even think, I don't even know what that is. Well, there's different ways to identify the spirit, and some call it intuition. But nonetheless, no matter what we call it, it is true, it's real, it's there. In any one of these experiences, intellectually or emotionally, spiritually or physically, if we deny the presence of what is real, if we deny reality, we begin to get confused. So this is what we can do, the solution to the problem. Being self-aware, like in the way the pilgrim that was walking across Russia, he purposely recited this prayer over and over and over again to bring him into the present moment and to bring him into awareness of a God who is already what he's asking it to be, merciful. In our case, what I would recommend is write down 3 columns: spiritually, emotional, and physical. and or intellectual, and ask ourselves, who do I want to be? Intellectually, the thoughts of what are the attributes of the person I want to be on a intellectual, emotional level. For example, I want to be kind. I want to be thoughtful. I want to be non-judgmental. I want to be, etc. Spiritually, what do I want? What do I want that experience to be? And then physically, what do I want this physical body to be? As soon as we make that list and write them down, and as soon as we act upon any one of them, we are becoming that already. In fact, we can say, I am. The greatest experience that we can say is, who am I, or I am. When we combine those three columns, spiritual, intellectual, emotional, physical, and we have those attributes down, those attributes are truly who we are. All we have to do is act upon them. Now, we get confused. Remember, when there's long suffering or any type of suffering, it could be addictions, it could be a history of abuse. So listening to the lies that people said about us and then believing them, and then telling ourselves lies and believing them, no matter what the case is. When we start to be aware of that, we are becoming aware of who am I? We are becoming aware of the I am of myself. It's a process. It's not about perfection. It's not about happening right now, but it can start right now. That list, the writing down, the identifying those elements. When I was a young friar or monk, there was this song I used to sing over and over again to myself in the shower, particularly when I was going to the gym. And it's how I want to be, Lord, just like you, and all the good things that I want to do. How I want to be, Lord, just like you, in the way you love, in the way you share, and the way you serve. Oh, Lord, I want to be like you. I became that. It was already inside of me. What was inside of me and who I wanted to be already existed, but I had to identify it in my mind and to know what those attributes look like, to say, that's me. Our mistakes do not define us. Our challenges, our problems, our addictions don't define us. The only time they can define us is when we allow them to control us and we don't take control of them. How do you take control of an addiction? You get into a program, you work the program, there's 12 steps, you follow them, and it all teaches you many of the things that I'm sharing with you, to reach out, to acknowledge where you are, who you are, what the issues are, to acknowledge that we have powerless over them. And when we reach out to other people and share them, that power loses power over us. We start to gain access over our true self, our true being. That's how we come to the place of knowing who we are, of finding the I am inside of me. It can't be done alone. We have to learn to love ourselves, and often, and that's unfortunate, but sometimes we have to find it through the love of others who are loving us objectively, with truth and objective love, those attributes I've shared many times in previous episodes. I challenge you to take the time for you. Make that list and understand, who are you? It's already there. Be patient with yourself. Be loving. Do not be critical of yourself. Do not be judgmental. Just identify them. And once you identify them, you're 70, 80% there. All you have to do is act on them. Be patient to someone in that moment, or take yourself out of the situation and do something different, whatever it takes to be you. I love you. Humanity is a beautiful creature. When we get separated from our spirit, and from when we deny all those elements of who we are, we become ugly. And it's not who we want to be. It's who we allow ourselves to become. It's a choice. Make the choice to begin now. I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same mustache, on Dennis the Monk. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, and I'm here to serve you. Have an amazing week.